Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica podcast partner, AFRI. AFRI is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it. Today we have a new story and we have a new storyteller. I have the pleasure to welcome you, Mara, to Urbanistica podcast. Hey, and welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
My pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I just took some of my own advice from my work and spent time in nature. We know that that's really beneficial to children. And so I actually did the same thing. I took a walk outside and just saw the nature so I could be well prepared.
Nice. So it's early in the morning, right? Because where are you now? Which
9
city
a.m.
or which state?
Yes, I'm in Boulder, Colorado in the United States. And so Boulder is sort of a western state, although on the map it's almost in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
And it's very dry here and we have beautiful Rocky Mountains behind us. So literally my daily hike is to hike in the mountains.
Nice. You're so busy, Mara.
So busy. And sometimes work and home even overlap. I was out for an anniversary dinner with my husband, and I decided I should speak with the chef of the restaurant to get him involved in some of our work around trying to get the word out about the work we're doing through this Tiny Diners program for our local restaurant week. And by the end of the meal, we had a free dessert and a plan to do social justice work around young people and food justice together.
Wow. You're maximizing every single minute, right?
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. So you're our storyteller. Let's start with you. How would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners and what are you passionate about?
Yeah. So again, my name is Mara, and my whole career up until now has mostly been working with underserved children and families. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think I come from a family where social justice was really important. And I would hear stories from my great aunts and my grandmother about the marches they went to and about just how they would buck the norms of the day, whether it was trying to push forward integration or school teachers' rights or just a whole variety of things. And so all I knew is I wanted to be involved in social justice. And over the years, that's looked like either creating universal pre-kindergarten programs for underserved children, creating family centers where families could come onto a school campus and have all of their needs met and also take a leadership role. And now I co-founded Growing Up Boulder, which is Boulder's child and youth-friendly city initiative in 2009. So that's 13 years ago. And we were founded out of the University of Colorado, Boulder. And so that has been my most recent version of what I'm working on.
Yeah. So what did you study as an academic?
Yeah, I studied psychology, so psychology undergraduate, and then organizational psychology for my master's degree. So I had intended actually to work with nonprofits to help them become more efficient and effective in their work. But then my work kept bringing me back to more the direct service field with children and families. And so, and I realized how much I love that. So I still bring some of my master's degree in, but really I found my place with working with children and families.
Cool. But was it like a specific moment when you decide, okay, I will focus on children and cities? Or no, it's just like you follow the flow and then you're here?
Yeah, I followed the flow, and it's kind of happened through various networking. And I will say that when I moved to Colorado, I had just moved from California. And at the time, I had a 1-year-old child. And so I knew I wanted to be able to spend time raising her and do something career-wise that I loved. And when I heard this concept of UNICEF USA child-friendly cities, UNICEF child-friendly cities, I just thought it was amazing. I'd never heard the concept before. And at that time, there was no infrastructure in the United States to do this work because while internationally child-friendly cities were happening, anybody who was trying to do it in the US was doing it sort of on their own through the best practices they could research and, white papers, but there was no formal support. So we created our own structure for what child-friendly cities could look like here in Boulder, Colorado. And it was based on some work they'd also tried in Denver, I should say, for 3 years. So that really helped launch us.
Yeah, but this before like you read about the UNICEF Child Friendly City Initiative, right? You already made a framework and so on.
Right. So I mean, before I came to Colorado, I had never heard of that. But when I came to Colorado, a professor I met, Willem van Vliet, introduced me to the framework and the concept of child-friendly cities. And when I saw that, I said, that has to happen in my city. I want it both for my own family, because I really believe in it. And I want it for all the other kids and families as well. So I was able to combine my own personal passion and my work passion to make it happen in my own community.
Is it true, Mara, that like when you get kids, you become extra passionate about the topic, like the child-friendly city? Is it true?
I find it's true, but I don't want that to make people who don't have children think that they can't be just as passionate or add just as much. But I think I do have a much deeper understanding of some of the issues of what it means to be a parent and to be navigating a city with a child. And just to give a very concrete example, something I might not have thought of before was trying to ride public transit. And in our local bus system, you're not allowed to keep your stroller open when you get on the bus. And
you need,
so, you have to collapse it. Well, and of course, any parent knows that you stuff all of your belongings, like 3 bags worth, right underneath the stroller. So if you have to collapse that have a toddler and another child on you, it's very hard to take public transit. So that was, and I've seen, for instance, in Germany, they allow you to get on the bus with the stroller fully open. And so it's those little differences that make a huge difference for parents.
So tell us more like about UNICEF USA Child Friendly City. Like tell us about what do you call it, project or initiative, or tell us about the story. Basically.
Yes. So when we were doing Growing Up Boulder for many years, I would call UNICEF USA, which is, for those who don't know, there's UNICEF Global, which you'll often see helping with different emergencies around the world and helping coordinate that. And then there are local national committees. And so those are separate nonprofits that do work with UNICEF Global. I didn't know this when I first started out.
Same here.
So did you know that?
No idea. No.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
But this is relevant because what would happen is I'd call UNICEF USA every year or so and say, hey, we're doing this thing that the UN says they support. Could you please help support us? And the answer I would get would be, no, this isn't really something we work on. That child-friendly cities just doesn't happen in the US, or we don't work on this. So when I did my yearly call in 2019, luckily there was a new person working there who said, Danielle Goldberg, who said, well, I don't know a huge amount about child-friendly cities, but we're looking into it and we want to start creating this in the US.
Cool.
So I jumped into gear and I sent her all the white papers from all the professors I had worked with and said, here, they've actually been researching this for 10 years and waiting for someone to pay attention. Literally, there had been a white paper written by the professor that I worked with that said, like, here's what it could look like in the US. And so she brought a lot of experts together and she held a meeting in Jacksonville, Florida, to start thinking with 100 other people about, like, what could this look like in the US? If you fast forward a little bit, UNICEF USA has now created this beautiful, comprehensive framework for child-friendly city initiative recognition. And it's a very long process. It's between 2 to 3 years, and it's extremely comprehensive. And so now, even though Growing Up Boulder has literally been doing the work, for 13 years, and we actually do the work really, really well of hearing from young people and diverse young people. What we hadn't done as well is some of the framework that went around it to be even more comprehensive. And that's the piece we're going to bring in and meld together with the direct service work we've been doing.
What was like what the main challenges before you like when you started in the beginning? What
Mm-hmm.
challenges you were like, okay, this is gonna be a big challenge for us?
Yeah. The first challenge was that we would hold after school action groups with our young people. So they identified the topics they wanted to work on, and they would come sometimes to weekly meetings, or we'd set up other meetings where they could delve into those topics. And we did have a few young people who were very into it. But I found that it was a huge amount of time on our part, and we weren't reaching so many kids. And also, we were not reaching as diverse a group of young people as I had hoped for. So we really took a pause and we said, how can we do this so that we're really reaching more kids, and more kids who might not have the opportunity to participate because they have to care for little brothers or sisters,
Yeah.
or have an after school job. So we started going into schools and into after school programs with underserved young people. And that just helped us to blossom, because then we had all sorts of young people who might not have chosen to think about affordable housing, who all of a sudden had really great ideas about it. And so that's really how we transformed. And now we have a lot of teachers and city departments and other communities that come to us asking for this work because they see the value in it.
But you work a lot like you're in touch with schools. Is there an infrastructure or you created that? Because I know it's not
We,
easy like to bring
yeah,
something from outside to school.
it's a really good question. I think so much of this is based on relationships, and relationships take so many years to develop. So, luckily, one of my colleagues is a former teacher in our public school system. So she is really well networked and really well respected. And so when it came time of which teachers could we work with or who would be
Yeah.
interested in this, we pulled on our own networks to start with, and then word would spread.
Mm.
At the same time, just recently, our school district is starting to have a more formal partnership structure with
Yeah.
partners, but that's only happened in the past year. So I would say this is really about building long-term relationships and using our own social capital
Yeah.
to meet
Mm.
people.
Mm. But like, what does it mean for the US when you say child-friendly city? Like, can you give us some elements that if we work on it, so the state will be more child-friendly?
Yeah. Well, at least for us, and of course, every city has to determine what works best for them. But what we have heard from our young people is it's a city that is more sustainable. So young people are able to walk, bike, or take the bus to get places because most of them can't drive. And so it's very important for them to be able to get around safely. It involves a lot of green, and it involves nature, and whether it's hearing from really young children, preschool age, about wanting to have flowers and
Mhm.
see animals nearby, to our high school students who are often thinking about sort of climate resilience and how do we work with that. Um, they really are thoughtful about how do we care for our world and all the beings that are living in it. It involves living in a place where everybody has a home. We hear that a lot from our young people. There's a large unhoused population in Boulder, and our young people are incredibly aware of that and feel that it's very unjust to be living in a society where people are just sleeping on the streets.
Mm.
Um, but it's also joyful and beautiful. A child-friendly city has all these elements of play woven throughout every part of it, and a lot of art as well. So I always say, I want to live in a child-friendly city personally. It doesn't matter if I have kids. I just like the city they build.
Yeah, yeah. So you believe that a city for children is a city for all?
Absolutely. Yep. And I see it. I see when their ideas are implemented, I have seen how it can transform a space.
Yeah. But do you have like a kind of project that you work with as action plan?
Yeah. So the way we have been choosing our work, and we have many projects every year that we work with, we will meet with our city officials and we work with the director of communication and engagement for the city.
Okay.
And so she will go to all the public facing departments and say, what topics would you like young people to give input on? And they'll send her their
Yeah.
recommendations. And we'll sit down with her and we'll say, okay, let's look at these, see which ones are most responsive to what we've heard from our young people, their interests. Also, what do we think is doable in the time we have with the budget and staffing we have. And that's how we choose our projects. So, for example, this year we're working on reimagining policing. We've been involved for 2 years in this, so this is the last phase of policing. We're working on what we're calling eco-healing. So helping young people respond emotionally to the fires. We've had a lot of fires in our community, but then also take collective action to actually ameliorate the situation. We're working on nature connection. So helping young people connect with nature in their own backyards and right where they live, and then actually building hope around nature. And then we're also working on helping young people heal from, unfortunately, a horrible mass shooting that happened in our community. So we really touch every aspect of a child's life.
And how do you do that? Like you're in touch with a department that's responsible for like this topic, or what do you call this? Yeah, I don't know, like specific area, and then you bring the children together, or how do you package it?
I'll give you an example
Yeah.
because it can sound very lofty until you really explain the details. So, for the eco healing work that we're doing this summer and fall, what we do is we first identify what are the goals of the project. And the goals are to help young people work through their feelings about the fires. The second is to help them learn more about how fires are both beneficial and problematic for the environment, and then help them take collective action to give input or to make change. And so what we've done is first we identify who do we want to make sure that we involve. Well, we want to involve different ages of kids, so preschool all the way through high school. Then we want to make sure we involve our Latinx community. We have a large Latino community here in Boulder, so we want to make sure we're hearing from young people from that community. We want to hear from kids with disabilities. So we identify who are our partners who are serving each of these areas. Then we reach out to the partners, and it's a lot of back and forth, a lot of scheduling, and we go visit them and we do engagements with their kids. And this can range from a one-time engagement. We just did one recently up in the mountains for 2 hours with a group of Latinx high school students, all the way to an entire semester project, where we work with English language learner teachers. We present the beginning and the ending of the project, and then they understand the topic and they implement it throughout. And we help them find experts too to bring into their classroom. And then in the end, our kids always share out with decision makers their views and have a dialogue. And we always create a report that decision makers and policy makers can take and refer back to.
How's the reaction of like now we have also like behind the scenes we have the parents, the schools. How first of all, like how is the reaction of the decision maker when you like hand in the report? They say, oh wow, or no, they don't really pay attention to this.
Well, I think it helps that we usually bring them into the room before we give them the report.
Okay.
So there is nothing more powerful, and I'm sure you know this from your work, of getting an adult in a room with a kid, and especially a young person who spent a lot of time on a topic and is very well versed, and having them talk together. And we literally have heard from our city council, from our staff, from others in the community, their favorite work in their career has been interacting with our young people. And so they do that first, and then the report is there as a backup. And what we find is we also try and make the report very accessible. So we put the summary of findings right at the beginning. So if you're not having time or attention to spend on it, you can just read that beginning. And we'll also present on it. So we try and find multiple ways of communicating what the kids have said.
And the reaction of parents, because I guess if in order like to speak with the children or to have workshops, you need to have the agreement with school and with their parents. Do you like get in touch with their parents, or no, the school is the face of parents?
So if we're working with the school, we really don't necessarily
Yeah.
get in touch with the parents, although on a good day, we will write a letter to the parents so that they're aware of the work their kids are doing. I mean, in an ideal world where we had enough staffing, we would absolutely engage the parents. We'd have a whole other component
Yeah.
there, but we just don't have the staffing for that. Having said that, I do get some beautiful messages sometimes from parents whose kids have been involved who said how powerful it was for their young people. Um, and occasionally we will have separate parent engagements, but mostly it's just focused on the kids. And occasionally there does need to be permission. Like,
Mm.
for example, we've been working on the healing and the trauma from the mass shooting. That certainly we got parental permission for because we want to make sure
Yeah.
the parents are aware of the work we're doing.
Yeah. And like, what are you, in your opinion, the key to make all this process works? What are the key elements?
I think it always goes back to relationship,
Okay.
and transparency.
Mm.
I think we just try and keep an open line of communication between all of our partners. We try and co-create our work. So our best projects are when the teacher or the after-school counselors are involved in giving us feedback before we actually do the work with their kids. The times it doesn't work as well have been when the person was too busy
Mm.
and they said, you just do it your own way. And,
Yeah.
and we've done it. And then it wasn't a good fit for them.
Mm. Mm.
So we don't want to overtax the teachers, but on the other hand, we do need a certain amount of
Yeah.
input to make it authentic and responsive to their group of kids.
Mm.
Um, the other thing is, we just try and be very frank of whatever we're working on. We want them to know where we are in the process. We want to tell them what we can promise and what we can't. I can't promise that the system is going to change. What I can promise is that I'm going to do my best to
Yeah.
carry your ideas forward and not let them fall away, even 10 years later.
Mm.
Yeah.
And Mara, when you say like co-creating, because when it comes to like community engagement, children, it's like co-creating is a very important element in the story, in the process. But sometimes we don't really trust, like we like, as a, now I'm talking from urban planning and architects, like we like to control and just to make sure that things gonna work in the end. So what is your
Mhm.
advice to us that we don't really give so much space for co-creation? Like how can we just let things go and trust, like trust the other part?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's something we all struggle with that tension. And for our own selves, because even when we were first forming the model for growing up Boulder, I would struggle with that of how do we authentically hear from young people and not overly influence them and basically get them to be saying what we want them to
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, but also while recognizing that a 10-year-old may not know what is even possible. So the conclusion we came to, and it seems to work well, is we start out by presenting the framework. This is what we're going to work on, and here's why your voice matters, and here's what's going to happen. And then we capture the kids' ideas before we can influence them. So we might have them build something or have them take photographs or have them draw something and label it. And so we're capturing their ideas before we've shared our own views. Then we'll say, okay, now we need you to do some more research. And this is more a longer term process. We have more flexibility when we have a whole semester. And so the kids will go out and do their own research, and we can point them to some areas that we've seen of great examples, but they also might find their own. And then they come back and they also figure out what questions they have and interview experts in the area. And we can help them find the experts like city commissioners. And then finally, they integrate their original ideas with new ideas to create a synthesis. And that's what they share out. And so usually by that point, it's sort of gone from the extremely expansive ideas that are maybe very impractical to somewhat more practical or at least well thought out ideas.
Did it happen that you got some ideas that completely not matching with what you thought and like the guidelines for the project, that you'd be like, okay, what should we do now?
Yes. I mean, I just had this the other night where um, we were working on this eco healing work, and we really were thinking about ways of telling the story of fires and what fires are like for the environment and for the people and the animals. But the one group I was working with just became obsessed with the idea. We had talked about public spaces, so they made a stage and an outdoor theater. Now, is that directly relevant to what we were talking about? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, you could be using it, right, to tell the story. You have performances that explain it. And at the same time, it was their way of saying how they wanted to experience nature was to be in the middle of the woods and have this gorgeous, all naturally made amphitheater. I thought that was really creative, and it's not what I would have predicted, but we can take that and pass that along, and then it's up to the decision makers of does that integrate into their final
Yeah.
project?
Yeah. So now we talked about like the key elements to make the process work. And how about the challenges that you're facing, main challenges?
Yeah. There are a number of different challenges. One that's almost a little funny is when we're working with teens, particularly for out of school time, it is just incredibly time consuming to try and find times that work and getting responses from teens. So often the intention is there, but then the follow through is a little bit harder. So we've learned we almost need someone full time dedicated just to communicating over text with our young people. They don't respond to emails, so text is what we need to do. Um, Other challenges are the funding. This is one of the hardest pieces for us. In the US, we at least my experience has been people are not aware of or understanding the holistic view of child-friendly cities or children's rights. And so when I have tried to apply for grants or talk to people in the public about funding a child-friendly city, it just doesn't resonate. I don't make progress. What I can make progress on is specific projects. And so that is really the challenge that I've been in for a while is how do we still fund the basic organizational structure that you have to have an underlying structure to be able to do projects,
Yeah.
but nobody wants to pay for that.
And how big is the team, by the way?
Yeah. Well, up until recently, it was literally just myself and our education director, both of us part-time, and then we'd have undergraduate interns. Recently, because we have so many requests, and we know we're about to launch Boulder as a candidate child-friendly city initiative with UNICEF USA, we had the opportunity to bring on a few more people. So right now, everyone, like most people are very part-time, and that means either 5 hours a week or 12 hours a week, other than myself and, 2 other people. But, we have 8 people on and off who are working with us right now, which is both amazing because they are fantastic, very smart people in different ways, and it's really hard to manage so many people, without that underlying infrastructure. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you so you work with this as a part-time, right?
Well, I am paid for 30 hours a week, and I'm really working 40
Yeah.
hours a week. So for me, it's full
It's
time,
full-time
and
for you.
for
Yeah.
yeah, and for my colleague Kathy, who's our education director, it's also full time.
Mm,
For everyone else, it is part time,
yeah.
though. Yeah,
And what is like the challenges on a personal level, like for you as a Mara, not for the
yeah.
organization, but for you?
Yeah, it's hard. It's interesting. I try and again practice what I preach. So if I feel like eating foods from locally sourced from the garden, cooking home cooked meals, if I feel like that is an important value I have for our young people, I'm trying to do that for myself too. And I'm highly aware that that actually takes a lot of time. And so actually one of the things I think a lot about is the expectations we have on our parents in this country. So I'm very envious of places like Sweden because you have the social infrastructure supports there. We simply do not, and we've created an impossible situation for parents. And I literally don't know any parents who are not stressed by the situation. And parents here, we tend to think it's our fault when in fact it's that we don't have the infrastructure we need for childcare, for what do we do if our kid is sick, for after school programs, it just for healthcare, all of these things. And so it's something I'd love for us to get into as we roll out the full child friendly city initiative project.
Yeah, yeah. It will be so cool, so good. So beyond this, we talked about the mass shooting and so on. So how is it going, and what were like the initiative that you did about this?
Yeah. Yes, for which piece?
It's about like the mass shooting in the schools and
Oh,
so
the
on.
mass
Yeah,
shooting. Sorry, I
yeah.
missed the keyword. Yeah, so that so we got a large grant from our local community foundation because what happened was they realized people weren't addressing the needs of children and youth. There were a lot of organizations looking at supporting adults. And we created with a group of 21 high school students a healing day of remembrance for all the loss that's come about from this. And but the key was we knew we needed a mental health specialist to work with us, and particularly someone who understands the intersection of multiple identities. So, people's race and gender and sexual identity, and how all of this layers with the trauma from local incidents. So, we worked with our partner, Maya Soul Dancy, who runs a consulting firm called My Emotion Healing. And before we even started the work on the young people planning the day, they learned how to take care of themselves and they learned how to have certain healing activities for taking care of their own needs. And then once they had that toolbox, they were then able to think about, well, how do they want to share that toolbox with others and what should they share? And we've heard from our youth that it was incredibly healing for them to do this. And actually, it's very sweet. Some of them have already told us that they've used this to stop panic attacks, to deal with their stress. Like they've used this in their own lives and taught it to their little brothers and sisters. And then we were able to offer it to 200 people in the community through this healing day. And then we transferred it to another museum where more children and youth could access this exhibit, all the benefits from the exhibit that we did. And we're going to keep working on it through the rest of the year.
How is the situation now? Like, is still like children are in panic or no? They start to understand how to protect themselves and how to like the awareness of this.
You know, I think mostly our young people and maybe ourselves too, we don't separate it out by, how do we deal with the shooting and how do we deal with the fires and how do we deal with the fallout from COVID? It's just these multiple layers of stress that are building upon our community. And so I think it really varies, but I think a lot of young people are still pretty traumatized from the shooting. I know of kids who wouldn't go back to the supermarket. There's just a lot of need to work through these issues, and we don't have systems in place that every single person can access all the time to do this. There are services out there, but a lot of people don't know about them too. So there's a communication issue as well.
What is for the plan for the child-friendly city in the US? Like, what is the plan for the coming years? How do you do like 3 years plan or not, like year by year?
It evolves, but there's a pretty structured plan of how it works. So there are 6 other cities in the US that are already engaged in this, and I think we're going to be the 7th. And the other cities are, now I may not remember them all, but Houston, San Francisco, Minneapolis, Johnson City, Tennessee, La Mesa, California, Prince George's County in Maryland. I'm missing one, I think. Anyway, we follow a process where it starts with what's called first you create a memorandum of understanding between UNICEF USA and the government. But next, what you do is you create a task force of young people and then leaders from different communities. So whether it's from the public health sector or from, family support services or just a whole variety of foster care, you bring everyone together. And then that task force helps you roll out the rest of it, which is a situation analysis where you're actually saying, like, what do the government indicators show about the status of young people? How is their health and well-being in our community? And then we'll go to the kids themselves and find out from them and from all ages and also from parents and service providers, how do you think we're doing, like as a community, on every factor regarding being a child? Based on all that data, we pull it together, and then the task force decides what are the top 3 priorities that you want to work on. And then we set a local action plan with strategies for the next few years to say, okay, here's what we're going to do to try and collectively, as a whole community, improve the situation of children. And then we measure it again. And so that is a quick version of what child-friendly
Yeah.
cities will look like.
It's amazing, like a lot of work, and it's important that you evaluate, right? You go back and evaluate. This is very important.
Yes. One of the things I'm trying to figure out is so the actual process in itself, right, is an evaluation. It's young people evaluating their own community.
Yeah.
But I'm also aware of how do we evaluate the process?
Yeah, this is what I mean. Like it's like
doing that.
the adults evaluate the process of children evaluating their.
And I want the kids to evaluate it too. I want to hear
Yeah.
back from the young people about what do they think of the process. So I haven't seen huge numbers of questions around that. What I think we will probably do is ask one or two questions to our participants saying, something like, compared to before, do you feel like your voice is heard more, heard less, heard the same? And what went well about this process and what would you improve? And so we have to keep it really simple, because after having had them spend an hour and a half evaluating all this other content, I don't want them to be so exhausted that they don't pay attention to the last question.
Yeah. Do you have like a specific digital platform that you have the community there somehow, or no? Like, how do you reach out to?
Yeah, communities have done it in a number of ways. Digital is certainly one way to do it. My preferred way for us to do it will be in person, and having meetings with the kids where you actually print out the different evaluation questions or assessment questions on a giant piece of paper on the wall, and the kids get stickers. They've done this around the world, in Haiti, in different countries in Africa. They get stickers and they vote, and then we have a discussion about it. And the kids in real time tally up the votes to see what rises to the surface, and they analyze it. So it's actually a really good math activity too. So I'm hoping the schools will let us do it there too.
Interesting. And I wish you all the good luck with the project, and I will be happy to follow up after like we start and to listen. It's important that you share from your side, so we here learn as well in Europe from what you do.
Thank you. Well, yes, and Europe has really set the stage for a lot of this work. I think a lot of European countries have really been on the forefront of implementing child-friendly cities in that model. And it's also, I don't want to say exclusive, but it's a very time-consuming undertaking. And it doesn't, at least here, it doesn't come with any funding. So this is basically, we're taking on an entire new project, almost like a new organization without any funding. And so I have to raise money for that as well. And so I think in Europe, though, my guess is that governments are probably more willing to support that sort of thing.
Yeah. Like, it's how to say, we kind of, because the thing that we started a bit earlier, so now the government start to understand. So it's like a question of time, like maybe in 2 or 3 or a few years, like even your government is going to start to understand. Okay.
And I just want to give credit. I want to give credit because our government is dedicating $50,000 for next year to child-friendly cities. So they definitely are stepping up to the plate.
Yeah.
And it's more a matter of that just the actual cost of this is so much more, and that I need local foundations to participate in it. So I do want to give them credit.
Of course, yeah. I think it's also the local partners are the key, like raising, let's say, money, you say?
Yes. Yes. That's correct.
Awesome. So, and I would love to take the opportunity to ask you, like, I work with urban planning, and many listeners are urban planners here and also working with urban design. So in your opinion, what should urban planners stop doing in order to plan and design a child-friendly city?
Oh, what a good question. I don't know that it's about stop doing. It's what they should include in their work. I just think so often we're often in a rush and we're looking for expediency. And I think they're missing some of the nuances of what actually could make their properties or their locations more appealing and sort of more sustainable in the long term. So, for example, looking really hard at how are we weaving nature in to this space that we're designing, because what we learned from our young people is, we talk about in urban planning, we talk about 15-minute neighborhoods, but for younger children, it's more like a 5-minute neighborhood, or even just what's on right there. So if we're not designing in spaces where our young people can hang out for free, in green spaces right there, then we're missing a really valuable opportunity.
Mm.
Yeah, and we just need to also think more about truly having safe infrastructure to get places. So, it's great to have a bike lane, but if it's on a really busy road with no protection or barrier, a lot of kids are not going to feel safe biking there. So you have to think about those details.
Yeah. And what skills you think are important for us in order to work with children and to involve them in planning future cities?
Yeah. I think being a really good listener, truly being an active listener, and reflecting back some of what you've heard young people say. But the other thing is a sense of calm and equanimity, not to be concerned when you hear ideas that seem outlandish. And let me explain. So, when you work with kids, you'll hear like, I always remember this one from a middle school student, so maybe 11 or 12. I want to be dropped from an airplane, down with a parachute and jump onto a trampoline. Right. And so a lot of adults, that just is
Yeah, like,
terrifying to
yeah.
them. Like, what do I do with that? But the answer is you need to be listening to the themes underneath it. So what is that young person hoping to feel? Like, what is the emotion or activity? They want to feel like that thrill in their stomach. They want something exciting and unusual. So, okay, so you can't have a trampoline that you land on from a parachute in the sky. But what you could do, could you create some sort of small trampoline? I've seen this in Denmark, a little trampoline built into a bench. Or could you have something that they can climb up, where they can get up high and still have that feeling of being up high and being able to look down on the area? What can create those thrill-seeking desires? And that's what you need to be looking for. And that's when you can really be
Yeah.
successful.
And how can we be an active listeners?
Mhm.
Like, what is the
Yeah,
key to be an active listener?
I think the key is to sort of, once you've heard what a young person says, sort of repeat back, paraphrase back what you've heard. So what I heard you saying is that you really want to be able to, jump high and have that thrilling feeling. And I think, again, if adults can ask maybe about, like, what is the underlying emotion or feeling in your body you're looking for? What is it about this space that would bring you joy? What is it that you're concerned about? I think those questions and really listening to their answers will help you be able to integrate the kids' ideas with what's doable
Yeah.
within your work.
Yeah. What do you think? I will like tell you two options and tell me which one you think is the best. Usually, when
Okay.
we work here in Sweden and within urban planning project with children, sometimes we call some teachers and they do the workshops, and then we talk with the teachers. And then the
Hmm.
other option that we do it directly with children. So, which one you think is the best and why?
Oh, I'm not going to give you the answer you want, which is I
No, but
think
like
both are
just like
great.
from your
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. I think both are great, and they get to different places, because I think when you're able to have teachers take ownership of it, you really increase the capacity and the number of people who can do this sort of work and give input. And the key, I think, would be is getting back from the teachers and the students information that you can use. So for us, for example, we've created, sort of a Google form where the teachers can fill out their main findings, like what were the themes, what were some of the quotes you heard from the kids, and then we ask them to attach images or videos of what the kids did. So that's one way to hear from them. Certainly when we work directly with the kids, just for us, we have a much better understanding of what they're saying. Um, but I also think that level of control can be hard to maintain, because then you become the bottleneck. If you're the only one who can do it, you
Yeah.
can't hear from as many people. So we do a mix of those things. And I just think they each have their pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
I
Do-
wouldn't pick.
yeah. Do you have a trick to find an active and a passionate teacher that willing to really go all in and give the energy?
Yes. Well, a lot of times from the very beginning, we'll talk up front. We'll have a meeting up front about what it involves. And we actually have an agreement we've created
Okay.
so that both parties know what the expectations are. The worst thing is to have a teacher who doesn't want to be doing it,
Yeah.
or an after school provider who doesn't want to do it, because then it's just a burden. But if the teacher's into it, they take it to an extraordinary level. And we've seen this over and over again. So we also have certain teachers that we go back to. And in fact, they'll come to us and say, what project do you have for us this year? And one of the most exciting things for us was during the pandemic, when everything was online, at least here, some of our English language teachers, so teaching English language learners, said that their real world work with Growing Up Boulder grounded the kids so much that they actually were able to accelerate in terms of their English language learning goals, whereas most other kids were falling more behind. And it was because the work was real. It wasn't just some made up textbook. And so for the people willing to put in the time and effort, it pays dividends, but it does take a little more time.
Yeah. And before we go to the next section of this episode, which is going to be about you, the last question is like, in order to make child-friendly cities, what do we need to work on really hard now? Like future cities, I mean.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, we just need to be willing to slow down and just be less impatient. I find that so many people I know, friends, family, colleagues, and myself, we believe in these concepts of let's get out of our cars and walk or bike or take the bus. But then when we're in a rush, right, I'll hop into my car. And I will say to urban planners, make it harder for me to take my car. Like, this won't be very popular, but like, make it harder for me to take my car. Make it harder for me to buy a single family home, but easier to live in a community with more dense housing that has beautiful community spaces and nature around it and is walkable and well connected. When you force us to make change, we usually like it. And you can see this with some of the work with like super blocks in Barcelona and other places. And even here in Boulder, I'll give a good example. In the 1970s, they wanted to turn this street in our downtown area into a pedestrian area. So block it off, no cars. And people fought it tooth and nail. The businesses said it's going to drive business. It's the worst thing that's ever happened. Well, that area is the most popular part of all of Boulder. And so I just think people are going to fight what's good for them. But eventually, once you do it, they actually like it.
This is so true. Like it's almost everywhere. Like in every city, it's happened like this. Everyone's against, and after you do it, oh wow, everyone loves it.
I think it's human nature. That's what I've come to believe. It's human nature, and sometimes we don't want to take our preventative medicine. So it's hard.
Yes. And now the second section of this episode about you, because in this podcast we talk about cities for people and also about people behind project Cities for People. So in 100 years from now, when people gonna Google your name, what would you like them to read about you?
Oh, that's a really great question.
I mean, you're famous. You did the TED Talk and so.
Yeah, I want them to know that it worked, that I was able to help elevate young people's voices, and particularly those from marginalized communities. And through that work, those young people felt more heard and more respected, that they became more civically engaged, that we saw kids who otherwise wouldn't have been civically engaged saying, I want to keep doing this. I want to know that there are more cities that become child friendly. And boy, wouldn't it be amazing if some of this resulted in all over the world cities that actually can continue for the future and not be overtaken by our fossil fuels and climate change and also by stress. Like I would love to say, wow, it really made us rethink how we're living our lives, and that we need to put more emphasis on the quality of our lives, not on the quantity of things we get done.
Interesting. How was your TED Talk experience?
Oh, it was terrifying to prepare for.
By the way, I work as a speaker coach here in TEDx Stockholm.
So
So
you're familiar with
yeah.
this.
So this is interesting what you're gonna tell. Yeah.
What's funny is I love being up on stage. That wasn't the part that I was worried about. The part I was worried about was the memorization,
Yeah.
because at least for our TEDx version, which I think most are, you're supposed to memorize it, but you also want it to look comfortable and familiar. And so for me, it was just really hard to memorize. So I would be practicing in the shower. I'd be practicing as I fell
Yeah.
asleep at night. Um, I will tell people the thing I found most helpful was recording myself doing my talk and then listening to it and trying
Yeah.
to talk along with it.
Yeah.
Is that what you tell people
Yeah.
too?
Yeah. We use this like mirror exercise, like record yourself and watch it, and then it's gonna be the material you work on.
Yes. One of the pieces of coaching advice that I received, which I loved and I've given to others and have found that it's helped. So my coaches said, you look so uptight during it. Why don't you try and remember this is a fun topic and to relax and enjoy it? And once they said that, it made perfect sense. But I was concentrating so hard, I'd forgotten to feel the joy of the
Yeah.
topic. And so I started to embody that, and just even smiling as I was talking. And that really changed everything and made it, I think, a much better talk.
Yeah.
But I also have to say, the TEDx experience, I worked really hard, and I feel lucky that the day that I recorded, that it hadn't been COVID yet. So I had a live
Yeah.
audience. I feel so grateful for
Yeah.
that. But B, I was able to give a smooth talk. And I think you can only control so much. So I'm lucky it worked out that way. But I also know some TEDx speakers who fumbled a bunch, and they had excellent talks. So some of it's luck of that day.
No, but
And then
it's about preparation. It's only about preparation. Yeah,
yes,
luck is preparation. So like
yeah,
if your talk is good, it means that you prepare very, very, very good.
yes.
Yeah.
And I had fabulous coaches who really helped me hone in on the story and think about, which pieces were, how do we tie this together in a way that people can really understand it and be excited by it. And then, of course, when it was picked up by TED on their homepage, I almost passed out when I literally had to sit down when
It's
I
a big
found
thing,
out.
a super big thing. Like, congratulations.
Thank you. It was such a big thing. And that really has had the most incredible repercussions, because now I get emails every other week from around the world, whether it's from a kid, a city planner, an elected official, a parent saying, how do we do this in our community? And so that gives me great hope.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you.
So if you will have the chance to give another TEDx talk, what will you talk about? Like, is there a niche or a specific topic this time?
So I have thought about this, but I actually don't want to give another talk. But the talk
Why?
I
Come on.
would give, oh, so stressful. Maybe if I recover, maybe in a few years. Too stressful
When you
though.
retire,
No,
then yeah.
yeah, when I retire. Actually, no. So what I really, well, one of the things I'd love to give a talk on is there are two things. One is understanding how a holistic approach, or a whole child approach, is more effective than the siloed approaches that we use, and that foundations and funders really need to start thinking that way. Because I hear a lot of foundations in the US, a lot of funding for nonprofits or NGOs comes from foundations. And I hear them saying, we need to get out of our silos
Yeah,
and we
everyone
need
is
to,
saying this.
yeah, but they're not doing it. And so I think until we can do that, we're not going to create systems change. They're too complex, but collective action approaches, I think, do work. And that's what Child Friendly Cities is. And so I would love the day when people can say, yeah, we recognize that you can't divide a child or a family into 5 separate pieces and only address one. You need to look at all of them together.
So true. So true. Hopefully you will do that. You just need to book some in your calendar.
Can I
Allocate
tell you
some.
the other TEDx talk I would give?
Yeah.
The other one is a little bit about what I said earlier, is that in the US, we are asking our parents to do the impossible. And that is why there's a constant state of stress amongst parents of all income levels. And that until we acknowledge as a country that the systems need to change around parents and families, we're going to keep continuing that stressful situation.
Yeah. This is like, this topic is very, very important, actually.
I mean, do you feel, it's curious, I don't know if these discussions happen as much in Sweden because you do have more in place to support families.
Yeah, like for us now, we're talking about how do we even make it better. Yeah. So because like we passed the first, level that we created this kind of infrastructure. Now it's about, okay, how do we make it better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, you're never done, right? With any of this. It's always
like you make it better, and
yes.
Great. So next question is about you naming one project that you're really proud of.
There are so many. Let me think. I'm trying to think which. Well, so one project that I think is a lovely project because it shows from beginning to end how young people can have a voice is the one that I talked about in my TEDx talk about the civic area. And so again, this is a park in downtown Boulder, and it needed to be changed for a whole number of reasons. Well, what's very special is that my office now is at the Boulder Public Library, which is where the civic area is. And literally every day on my walk to work, I walk past what 225 young people gave input to. So there's an entire play area that's all nature play with water and trees and flowers. They've restored the habitat as young people asked for.
Wow.
You can enter into the creek more gradually and it's less dangerous because young people asked for that. And so all of these things came from our young people. Oh, there's also a biking and walking path that are separated out. And I get to walk past that every day and see the kids and parents with so much joy there.
Wow.
And occasionally I can't help myself and I'll stop and I'll tell them, these ideas came from kids like you, and the kids are just blown away. So that's really very special.
That's so nice.
But I also am super duper proud of the work that we're doing with young people to help them take care of their emotional well-being in the face of trauma and tragedy, and that we continue to do. And I'll have to send you this beautiful photo from the eco-healing work. We wanted to assess how young people were feeling after they had done the work, because we actually learned very early on that when we started showing them pictures of the fires or talking about fires, they actually got really activated. And some of the kids, we felt terrible. They had headaches and they were really upset. So we were actually this only happened once, but there was a re-traumatization. We said, no, we can't do that. We're not even going to ask how they feel at the beginning because we know that fire makes them feel stressed. But we can ask how they feel at the end after doing this project. So one of our team members said, why don't they write how they feel on their hands after, and washable marker. And so we have that. And the words are joyful, grateful, excited, inspired.
Wow.
And it's working.
That's so beautiful.
It's really working. Yeah, I'll have to send you the photo.
Yeah,
you can use it.
Do that. So now name one thing that you regret, something you did in your career and when you look back, you regret.
There is one project that I regret how we approached it. We were working with Latinx young people, and we were getting their input on this idea that came from some older white men about what they wanted, a piece of art that they wanted in the community. And it was just such a huge disconnect. And I feel like it didn't serve our young people well. But again, it actually was, I always try and learn from anything that doesn't go well. And my takeaway was that the coordinator, director of the program for the young people didn't sit down with us to co-create it. And because of that, we sort of missed the mark on what her young people needed.
Okay.
Yeah. But I also think it speaks to the need to have people from a community co-create the work. And so we've always had the intention to do it. And only recently have we been able to hire someone, but we just hired 3 Latinx people from within our community. One is a young person herself who's worked with us. The other just got her master's in education. And then the third is a sociologist who has lived in our community for 6 years.
Wow.
And I feel like with them on board, we're going to have fewer of these mistakes because they're co-creating with us.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
And with all the busy schedule, do you have hobbies or do you have time for your hobbies?
I do, a few things. One is spending time with friends. And luckily, this is what I love about my community. There's a culture here of getting together. When you get together with friends, sometimes you go to a coffee shop, but a lot of times you go for a hike or even for business meetings. And so I routinely get all the things I love in one spot. So I get to do a hike in nature. So I get exercise.
Yeah.
I get to be in beautiful nature, and I get to be with a friend. And that is so special to do that all the time.
Yeah.
But the other thing is recently I took up crocheting. I taught myself, well, my daughter, who's 15, helped me learn a little bit of how to crochet, and I love it, but I just don't have all the time I want to do that. And reading and listening to podcasts and
What is your daily routine? Like, when do you wake up? What do you do?
I wake up at 7, and then I spend a lot of time in bed trying to catch up on the news, and also being in touch with friends from college, just seeing what they're up to, looking through my emails. Then ideally, after having breakfast and spending a little time with my family, I try and get in some sort of movement, whether it's yoga or a hike or working out. And then sometimes I go into the office. We have team days, and other days we work from home. And every day is so different. So I might be doing a lot of networking meetings where I'm meeting with people in the community who want to be involved in some way. I also have a lot of meetings with my team. And you would just have lots of meetings, but it's funny. All of our meetings I love. Like when I talked to my husband, he said, I have another meeting. It's terrible. When I have meetings, I say, these are the best. I love these meetings because we're doing the most creative, meaningful work. And so it's really energizing.
But do you work from home, or no, you have an office now?
We have an office at the library, which has been donated by our library because we contribute so much to the community and support their work too, which is huge because library rental space here is very expensive for an office.
I can imagine.
We're kind of outgrowing it, so I'm not sure what we're going to do about that, but we'll just all pile in for now. But so we go into the office about 3 days a week, and then the remaining days I work from home. And I will say with COVID, and I think this has affected everyone, it's very disruptive. So for instance, we have all these meetings planned, and one of our team members just came down with COVID and then exposed other team members, which is not anyone's fault. It's just the world. And so we may have to cancel meetings for the next week. So it is hard sometimes, but that's just the world we live in right now.
Awesome. And now we are in the final section, and it's about you giving messages. So the first question, 3 questions. The first one is that you give a message to yourself.
To myself?
Yes.
Remember that I'm in this for the long haul, and that change takes time, but it's always, this effort has always paid off, and it will pay off, and we will get there, but it just takes a very long time.
Yeah. And 3 messages to our listeners.
Okay, one is to start small. Don't feel like you have to do it all at once because, perfect is going to be the enemy of good. Just do it well enough and test things out. Actually, so that's the first one, to start small. Pick a project and some champions who you think will be into whatever the project is, and just start there and then build from there. The second part is to iterate, to learn from mistakes and assume that mistakes will happen. But the key is what you do when it happens. And to also give yourself some tender, loving care when you make that mistake, because for those of us in this field, we tend to feel very passionately, and it's really hard not to get everything right. And that's not realistic. And then this third message is to hopefully build joy and fun and humor into the work. Our team we have so much joy. We have so much love and passion. And that's why we keep coming back. That's why we're willing to do this work in spite of the frustrations, is the joy.
Yeah. So I'm so happy to hear you. You're so positive. I'm happy to hear your takeaway messages. And the last question in this episode, it's about you asking it to us. What is your question to me and to our listeners?
If you had one suggestion for us in the US or in my community embarking on child-friendly cities, what would you suggest based on your experience? We're always learning from the wisdom of others around us. And so I would love to hear from you, Mustafa. Like, what would your one suggestion be, to wish us on our way?
Yeah, I will think about an answer and email you the answer.
Okay, good. And then we can share it with the listeners too, so they get to benefit from your wisdom.
Yes. Thank you so much again for giving your valuable time. I'm really happy that we have this conversation, and I will be more than happy to follow up your work and do even more other episodes as well.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me and sharing with your listeners.
Well, thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. You learned something new and also got inspired by the guest. Don't forget to share the episode on your social media and recommend it to people you think they are really interested in this topic. Thank you so much again for giving your valuable time to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif. Keep up the good work. Keep loving cities.